We've circulated, and there are copies here, if no one has them, sort of a comprehensive markup of the document. And what's occurred in the last week since we met, I took a stab at some of the organizational issues, and I forwarded that around, and several folks in the room and not in the room commented on that, and I've asked Shana to just kind of capture all that in one document. So I'm not sure I want to reopen things we've already discussed. You have the mission statement. I thought we resolved that last week, but you did weigh in on it with comments if everyone reads the right-hand bar. So I don't know if we want to reopen the things that we spent 2 hours last week discussing. So do we want to reconsider the mission statement? Matt, do you want to talk about your comments?
I just wanted them for the files.
Okay. So,
People have heard me.
Yep. So geographic boundaries, I think we covered that. The where we work comment, Shane?
Did you see Tom Cole? I don't see Tom Cole's comments in here.
I didn't see Tom Cole's comments
Maybe me
at all.
They came in rather late.
They might have come in after I sent it
How did he send them?
by email.
To everybody?
Yep. I think to everybody.
Let's see. Matt, you were the last one.
Does anyone know when?
Yeah, 4:26 p.m.
4:27.
Yeah, I read them a half an hour ago.
Okay, so we're into those.
Oh, I see it.
Just look at board. Well, it sounds like he's going to come up and join us.
Yeah.
Well, he said he was going to try.
He's going to try, but he's at the meeting that is starting right now as well.
But here are his comments on this one. Well, he wasn't here last week. I feel like we're reopening the mission discussion all over again. And I don't see this organization, if it even comes to pass, as being something that's going to take the place of anything else that exists. I just don't see how that's feasible. I hear the concern, but I just don't think that's ever been the premise that anyone's articulated in this setting or in this context or in setting up the concept of discussing the CDC.
And here's my thing with regard to understanding of the mission statement and the vision statement for any organization. That oftentimes they are grandiose and far-reaching and global. But at the end of the day, when you set your business plan and that structure into place, that's when you start to iron out the specifics and the scope of work that you intend to do on a 1 to 5 or 10 and indefinite business plan. So the notion of the vision is that it gives you some flexibility for the organization to be nimble in the event that circumstances do change and they need to address other needs. But in the meantime, you have that mission, whatever it is that the business decides to do within the scope of its plan on a year-to-year basis, as it sets very definitive goals, that those address the mission and don't reach outside of that.
I'm fine with the mission statement as we drafted it. So, notwithstanding the comments, and there may be more comments that come in, some of those joints, I think we've got to move forward.
That's fair, and I can, note for the record or whatever, and I don't disagree that they should be aspirational and whatever, and they can, to me, it's actually not the mission statement. It's that I feel that we've spent whatever weeks together exploring and molding and throwing stuff against the wall and all that good stuff, and I still don't know exactly what this thing is going to do. And I think to take ownership of property that is unlikely to be picked up by other people and to develop it with some, and you're the expert here, some sort of ground lease or whatever the appropriate thing is, county passes that along, this CDC or CDO does its thing, and I actually think no one else is going to do that, and it's non-trivial. And the part that then every time I think we're sort of coalesced around that, then someone's like, well, but of course that revenue will be for all the other things that we're going to do. And I'm just like, well, what are those other things then? Because I think let's start small and kill it. And then if there's a there and there's more, and a needs assessment, a real needs assessment, not one that we all did in an hour and a half. And I'm not saying that those things are wrong, I'm just saying they're not validated. I think then we can, I use the royal, like whoever's part of this thing could then expand and do other really great work. I just think start small and kill it, particularly where, anyway, you've heard about this.
Yeah, and I think we've had that discussion.
Yep.
Quite a bit. So my suggestion would be at this point, adopt the mission statement as we agreed to last week, the geographic boundaries as we agreed to last week.
I'm going to resolve comments as we.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then the where we work comment, Shana, I don't know if that was,
That was in your outline.
okay, I'd take that out. Just might have been a drop thought. I threw forward. And then the next, structure and staffing, this is where I tried to make an effort, and feel free to weigh in. Creative Board of Directors comprised of a diverse group of planners, economic development specialists, historic building preservationists, social services, legal housing, finance experts. I just tried to cover the gamut of things I've heard thematically that we've all been describing as some of the skills that board members should offer that would be relevant to the mission of the organization. Is there anything I've missed? Is there any change anyone wants to suggest to that?
I think you should include the business community. I know that could be economic development, that could be finance, that could be all that, but I think the business community should be included in that group of prospective board of directors.
Right, so the thought there was the advisory board might be the place where the business community would play a role. Other organizations all have a place, but that we try to make a distinction between, and avoid conflicts of interest, frankly, between the board of directors and the advisory board. That's sort of the premise as I thought about this would be a way to structure it. And I called it a standing advisory committee. In the last bullet in that section, I've described, the partnership, Tasco Heritage Greenway, property business owners I've captured, Chris, the groups that aren't on the board, but they advise the board on a regular basis. That's just, I'm fine. And I did look at board structures, Tasco Heritage Greenway, some other groups. It seems pretty consistent that they bring, or try to bring, the challenge is attracting these people and finding these people. And hopefully they're energized, as this core group of people have been energized about seeing this discussion through, but that we find people who have that commitment and they have these skills, these backgrounds to help put this organization in the right footing. So, I posited on the executive director a background, and I threw the executive director into the structure staffing section. And a background, again, mixed-use, community-based development. I like the community aspects. Thank you very much, Mark. Preferably in historic building context, because I think that's a big part of the challenge here. Most everything that we're dealing with is in and around historic buildings. Expertise in promoting, structuring, managing successful P3s, skill in real estate negotiation, land use, contracting, asset management, design, engineering, finance. I'm not sure this person exists on this planet.
All of those.
I don't know, but I
think they're generalists and they're aware, have some understanding of the language that goes on. Yeah, once they got into the weeds.
I don't know that you're completely painting a unicorn here, but to your point, they're going to be generalists in all these areas and not PhD. So,
Well, this is idealistic. I think the goal is, well, what will happen is we'll come as close as we can to tracking.
Sure.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose the side comments. I think Kerry had a comment, the next one down on the list here, clearly stated CDC board or CDO should anticipate prepare for intense public scrutiny. CDO must have a robust conflict of interest statement policy that requires disclosures and develops procedures for determining if a conflict exists and set clear expectations or strategy for how to manage conflicts. Recusal from votes. So there's probably a provision we could add in here about conflicts of interest.
And I completely agree with that.
So we'll add that.
So you have a line here that said board members should be conflict of interest free.
Okay. That might be enough, just to say, to get the thought out there, let others that are more legally inclined to figure out how one complex
I
that.
got
On any board, you,
Everybody has a day.
yeah, you
Yeah, right.
recuse yourself if you kind
Right.
of,
Well, and
on a
there's
particular.
you sign at the beginning, when you join the board, and then there's a recusal process, and yeah, absolutely. But it's great to call out, absolutely.
So I think that's good.
Yeah. You don't want to necessarily get somebody on the board that's got a huge conflict of interest
Yeah.
up
pervasive,
front.
yeah.
Pervasive. That's like, what's the point?
And then Matt, your comment, the next one down, document sets forth quals for board member expertise, not specified at present understanding of the specific watershed community, particularly its business, property owners, and residents, the board itself, not just the advisory board, must include multiple individuals with, and maybe I can drop some of the language there.
I just think there's gonna be so much more buy-in from the community if they see community people as part of it. Notwithstanding the advisory board, I actually think the board needs at least one or two who are like, part of the community, because otherwise you're gonna, the antibodies will grow. Just my 2 cents.
Well, you think the advisory board could fly as a way to, show, demonstrate?
I think just
the
because of
goodwill?
the pure numbers, you'd have to have an advisory board and committee or something, that's how we did it. Maybe it should
Well,
be-
I'm not saying I disagree with the concept of the advisory board, I just think that the board should have one or two that are plugged in, because if everybody's sort of bringing awesome expertise, but there's no hook to the county, not the county, to Ellicott City, to the catchment area here, I think it's just, I'm just saying that people are gonna be like, antibodies are.
I'm happy with that.
So what do you want to add where?
Add to the list of skill sets, I guess, on the creative board of directors comprised of community representatives.
Constituents.
And we'll leave the numbers alone for now, because we'll let other people figure that out. I do think I did say 9 or 11 member boards. That was,
Yeah.
that I did take a
That would allow the
stab at.
county executive to nominate somebody from the community to bring forth on the, is that right?
Sorry, do you want to say that again?
So that would allow the county executive to bring forth somebody who is a community
Member.
member that would basically, they could be the one that acts as the major liaison for all the other community organizations.
Sure.
It gives a clear voice of communication in both directions to the board.
So you might charge the advisory board, organization with selecting someone.
Yeah. I think also that, all of this is just a recommendation, but I think, it's very possible that, as they say, no good plan will survive good through the first contact with the enemy, not the enemy, I shouldn't say the word. Clearly, we're just with reality, because someone might say, we don't want a 9-person board or 11 person, we want 13 or 7, and we're going to pick it this way because so I think it's worth the discussion, but at some point,
So I don't overlook it, but I said 9 or 11 members, maybe 11 is better if we're going to add community. We
I
just
think
have to
it's
look at
just
the number.
giving a hint to the executive that you want it to be lean.
Yeah,
And experience has shown,
but not so lean.
It's functional.
yeah.
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 So would 11 make more sense?
Much more sense.
Okay.
Especially if you want to get a diverse group of people with these different expertise, these skills, hard to get over 9 folks.
And I tried to be balanced. Again, I'm just throwing it against the wall. 2 members recommended by appointment from the district. 1 represented the balance. In this case, it'd be 9 members appointed by the county executive. To ensure skill sets are found, roles of diversity and mental appointees must be confirmed by the majority of the county council. So there's engagement at all 3 key levels, District 1 level, full council, and the county executive.
So, to Matt's point of one of the community people, do we want that position to be filled by the county, the county council person that represents it. We want them to have that choice.
I wasn't trying to split it.
Oh, no, I'm just wondering if that would be a good fit.
I think that'll be it sounds like the best way to approach it, if you have the person who represents that district actually appoints the person, all the county executive, but I think the district representative will be more familiar with the person who's more suitable to serve than the county executive would be.
I frankly think I kind of want agreement both the county executive and District 1. And depending on our catchment area, it might be more District 1. But
That's true.
I personally just think there's some, like that, it's an important person. You don't want to just have it be sort of too political, but maybe a check and balance on that.
You
I'm just
want
throwing it out there
somebody that
again.
really is on the street.
Right.
That,
Gets
they know
it.
what's going on. And how do you find that person? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, you don't want to be a political opponent, we know that, but, it will be even if the county executive makes the selection, and it will be if the district person makes the district representative makes the selection, but you have more of a chance of finding the right fit, I think, if the district representative makes the appointment. That's just my thought,
So do we want the community person, and maybe two, actually, to come from District 1 seat, county executive seat? Who makes the call? Does it matter? Do we want to punt on that, let the county executive and the council figure that out? Because there's
I'd say
legislation.
It either comes from the executive or the district person.
well, the chair is
Control
going to be,
that. It's getting too much minutia. And after a certain point, it's going to be the executive style of how he does.
Yeah. He or she is going to appoint most of the people to the group. And people roll off if we do 4-year cycles and we have to stagger things initially, as I suggest here. There'll be ample opportunity to repopulate the board, both by the District 1 representative and by the county executive. So,
It was just, again, looking at it from the community standpoint of if you really want community buy-in, that kind of gives us from top to bottom of saying, community is represented by their council person, that council person goes to the board, county executive, so it would just appear to be a lot of buy-in, but again,
I'm happy to
not
say.
going to fall on my sword for
I'm
that.
happy to say 2 members to be recommended for appointed by the District 1 representative, of which one will be a community representative, and the balance will be appointed by the CE. Shane, do you think that would be okay? Let's do it.
Yeah, community representative, is that what you said?
A community member representative. Okay. We covered conflict of interest. Members serve for a 4-year term. Terms are staggered. So there's institutional overlap, knowledge. Board's responsible for hiring executive director. I think we all agree that's probably where it should be. The board will have a chair, a vice chair. The chair, I'm suggesting, be recommended by the county executive. Just want to quickly bypass anybody here. This is just language I suggested. There'd be a treasurer, and the committee structure be determined by the board members. I didn't want to be presumptive in terms of how they might want a committee themselves. I think we're getting way too far in the weeds if we do it this morning.
Is there any need to specify an attorney? I think the nature of this organization, you always need an attorney.
Yeah, but that would go to the membership, the composition of the membership. I say legal, so I have a legal.
I saw it earlier, the legal, yes.
So I think, and they'll have outside counsel.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
So I'd assume there would be outside counsel.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too much
Yeah,
into.
most lawyers on boards don't serve as lawyers for a
Exactly,
board.
no.
Right.
They can bring their magic, but
Right.
typically you want outside counsel to weigh in on
Right.
board things.
The contracts and those matters,
Yeah.
so.
Well, it isn't, my board experiences, I think there's always an attorney, it's just they brought that perspective. Well, you need to think about this and think about that.
Yeah, oh.
Approach that.
As a board member.
Yeah.
As a board member.
But
Yeah,
not
they don't-
as legal counsel.
No,
Right.
I'm not talking about
So,
legal counsel, I'm
I think
saying the expertise.
I've covered it.
Okay.
I have legal, so there may be more than one lawyer on the board,
Yep.
for that matter. Okay. Executive director reports to the board responsible for overseeing all functions of the organization. And then I took a stab at the sort of skill sets, and we went through that a few minutes ago. Strong public presentation, community stakeholder engagement skills. We want somebody who really knows how to work a room and engage everybody. Let's see what this is. The executive director defines staff needs, skill sets, and conducts the recruitment and hiring process. So it's really up to that individual to populate the staff, again, with board input. Now, over on the side, Brooke mentioned comment number 4. I think we should set some basic qual requirements for the, I don't know if she meant, bachelor's degree, a master's degree, that kind of thing. I wasn't trying to get down in the weeds that far.
Right, I don't know why I feel like I didn't see that.
So
Yeah,
maybe
because I think
Because you've got,
as you mentioned, that's
Right,
a
that's a
Renaissance
fairly-
person.
Yeah.
And that's what you're looking for, so.
so I say that's resolved.
So we okay? All
Just
right.
2 other comments in this section.
Great. And then Ed's comment was, should we consider staffing needs for the executive director? He's not here, unfortunately, tonight. I'm not sure if he means assistance, and I don't know what he really meant, but I'd like to give the executive director the flexibility to define staff needs, skill sets, and conduct the recruitment.
It's going to change as it
process.
goes. She
We're not,
goes along.
yeah, I don't see this organization being an organization run by one person. That's it. Hopefully there's enough going on that they can support. Carrie, who's not here, Brooke, you are here, forgive me for saying that. If you do go into staffing, per Brooke's comment, from my limited research, staffing levels, they say consumer structure, I would suggest starting at least an ED administrator program, or I'm not getting anything out of that comment.
What comment was that?
After Ed's release comment, it's HS6.
Carrie.
Oh, Carrie's.
Carrie's comment.
Yeah.
If you do go into staffing conversation, per Brooks' comments, from my limited research into staffing levels of CDCs, they seem to be similarly structured, which is good. I would suggest starting with at least an ED.
Executive
Admin.
director.
Administrative, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I
think
don't-
it's a
Community
director.
I
outreach
think it's
person?
let the director figure it out. Okay. Next comment from Carrie. This is down the road, but if there is any potential with CDC recipient federal funds, and there is, it should be a priority to establish their federally negotiated contract number. I would say, of course. I think they're going to pursue any and all potential funding opportunities. So I think that will be covered.
Actually, that might be one of your staff people, who's someone that's assigned to find money.
Right.
Right.
Number 8, when asking for support, include resources for the board, executive director to establish strategic plan, business plan, budget plans, project consultant fees, and anticipate electronic clear startup costs. Again, I do think that's just part of what the executive director would be doing. Okay. Matt, number 9. Let's see. I don't think I'm down that far yet, Matt.
Yes.
Okay, let's hold on to that. We'll come back to that in a second. So that's structure staffing. If we're all set there, we can close that one out.
Do you have a number for how many people you want?
I did not.
The
I left it
advisory
open.
committee?
Yeah.
Is it necessary to specify?
I think it depends on how often you meet PhD once a year, and it's like, got a list.
It's long.
It's long. So it begins to talk to the nature of.
You want to just
how
leave
many-
it
I don't think you
open-ended?
identify it now. I think
Yeah.
it's,
Why don't we just leave it open-ended?
I don't want to preclude anybody. And maybe that's part of the executive's charge.
Yeah.
Figure out how you utilize the advisory.
Happy to kick a couple of cans down the road here. That's a good one. Okay. Funding? I think we're all set. CDO will be self-sustaining through building lease, ground rent income, grants, gifts, other means as pursued by the organization. Until adequate cash flow is established, county state support will be critical to the organization's formative years. And supporting the organization's formative years. No, there's one here. So, Matt, your comment, number 9. It's not entirely clear what the CDC revenues will fund and whether these revenue-based the catchment area, Great Ellicott, City, Howard County, broadly, this should be called out somewhere at least at a high level.
This is just back to the whole, what are we doing? Said my piece, don't have to relitigate, but.
Well, to your point, I think that we should state that whatever funds are being generated by this come back into, to either pay for itself or pay for things within the catchment area.
What are those things?
That's right, what are those things?
Well, I mean, I'll give a for instance, if a property comes up for sale that's adjoining something of interest, if funds were available, then the CDO could then purchase that and bring that in and use it as part of the greater redevelopment versus having to go elsewhere or just ignore it.
I think it would be, maybe first, if we're lucky enough, there are extra funds for outside distribution, that they be earmarked for the catchment area or something like
Yeah.
that, and leave it at that, as opposed, I've seen stuff just going to the general fund, and it's going.
Yeah, it's good.
By parking
It wants
meters,
to earmark for the catchment.
the parking meters that we're supposed to pay for the parking garage.
I don't
All
think
went into the general
this was a
fund.
cash cow. I mean,
No.
I think it's going to struggle. I think it's going to be challenged. It's going to have some difficulties figuring out how to pay for itself.
I think the top of the list would be, if there is ever extra, it's identified as going to the flood mitigation. That's going to take a lot.
If it were
Does that mean
ever-
engineering
I-
projects?
I can't see it generating that kind of cash flow again.
Well, it would be part of, it's like a general fund that's earmarked for flood mitigation or something like that.
How would the county receive those funds?
Okay, so as an altruistic thought, is it, if this kind of is all wrapped up and they've had to take out bonds to pay for the flood mitigation, something saying that any excess goes to paying off that bond issue? Is that what you're talking about?
So the
Well,
CDC is going to pay off a county bond?
Is that even legal? Can the county accept a gift in that way?
The county could accept a gift, I'm sure. Could they, the dollars earmarked for bond repayment, that's a municipal obligation.
Yeah, I don't know. That's not my field of expertise. Spitballing.
I think we're
So
over.
we're in the weeds.
I think
Yeah,
we're over.
I'm wondering.
Can we go-
if it's really-
He's gonna do it.
But what
It's
I
not
mean here-
gonna- It's not gonna make that much money. It's
I'm
gonna
just saying, in
cover its
general terms, that it's
expenses.
earmarked for the catchment area or the watershed.
Yeah.
And so,
So here's what I've heard though, sorry, but go ahead.
go ahead, because we're probably gonna go down.
What I've heard though over the last weeks is, we're gonna get all this property and it's gonna generate all this revenue and that's gonna be great, then we can execute the actual mission. And I'm just saying, all right, well, what does that mean? What are we gonna spend the money on, right? And I actually personally think, like I've said 1,000 times, that I think to focus on just redevelopment and managing those properties and doing cool things with whatever, that's a great place to start and lock on. If we wanna expand in later years to fill other needs and evidence-based, great. But people over the course of the past 10 weeks or whatever weeks have said, no, there's a broader mission. The property is just the vehicle to the broader mission. And what I want to know is, okay, great, this is an excellent time for us to just put that on paper.
So, and to your point, Matt, and I'm in agreement, because I think to try to get tangled up in the county's business, if you will, is stepping outside of our reach. And the whole purpose is to have the CDO to do things that the county can't do, right?
Let me
Or
give you-
isn't positioned to
Let me
do.
try to
So-
give you an example of what the money could be used for. So, the tenant improvement costs. So if you have a space, retail space that is one of the handful that will be granted to this organization, and the county has stabilized the building, they've dealt with environmental remediation, there could be a mechanism to pay back the county for some of those investments that were made, or the dollars, if there are dollars that can be made through the rental streams that are excess, after overhead is taken care of. Maybe it's used to offset some of the build-out costs. So we encourage tenancy. We have a grant program. We have funds available. Montgomery County does this regularly. And they encourage business growth that way.
Right.
So there might be a mechanism by which the money is pulled back into Gary's point, within the district, within the catchment area. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Burke.
That's okay.
Okay.
Oh, I have one more point. But I was thinking, like, and along the lines of what you're saying, if we begin to like rebuild those properties and then, number one, pay back the county what we can for the build outs. But in addition, like sponsor activities, have rentals, particularly for people who are in the community, to offer opportunities at low cost for them to build up things, and that begins to support the mission. Because then they're actually using those properties and helping us to generate, or helping the CDC to generate that revenue, but they're also doing activities that are community building within those buildings.
So what I'm hearing you say is supporting the ECP and the Economic Development Committee. I mean, that's, because those are the kind of people who are already, back to the point of not duplication of effort, we have some people who are doing that already.
Or a space for Main Street,
Right.
which
Okay.
doesn't really have a space. You know what I'm saying? So there's all kinds of opportunities
Right.
that they could be in.
But
that other
to Gary's
towns-
point, just it goes back into the catchment.
I think that, you know, to me, my concept is that one project you get so far and it begins to be implemented and begins to realize some revenues, you take those revenues and you focus on the next projects because you got consultant fees and there's all kinds of fees in development. And again, I see there's a lot of project opportunities for public land in the watershed area.
So now is the plan still to acquire the properties, be it long-term lease or otherwise, from the county post-remediation?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're still on that, okay.
Yeah, the county is going to stabilize the buildings, they're going to knock buildings down entirely, or they're going to knock the rear parts of the building down that are over waterways that are going to be improved. And so there'll be some facades that will be left of not great depth, 25 feet is what we heard in the press conference a couple days ago. So there'll be an effort to repopulate that space. It's challenging because of the bay depths aren't that great. You want 80 feet in depth, typically 70 feet for most retail spaces. So 25 is a bit of a challenge, but it is what it is. And there may be other properties that will be identified that could be granted to the organization after stabilization or remediation are done. So, and that's all part of a broader discussion, all beyond our discussion about how much money the county's going to invest in those properties initially. So those discussions, I can't anticipate right now, I don't know when they take place.
And another, again, I don't want to get into the weeds, but philosophically, maybe the county doesn't ever sell them and they lease it. If you create value, why don't we recognize them? And, but that's very long-term.
I focus on
Esoteric, that's not for us.
ground leases as being the most appropriate vehicle for both the county and this organization, because then they have long-term ownership. And the properties revert at the conclusion of the lease, a ground lease back to the owner, whether it's a county or the organization.
I would say fortunately for Main Street to address you're talking about the depth of bays. We've got a multitude of stores on Main Street who are very shallow, like Munkles and Squeaks, who didn't have that kind of depth but had vertical space, and were highly successful.
No, it's finding those people. Mike speaking to franchise, you go talk to a retail leasing agent.
Right.
Most
He
restaurants
tell you need this.
non-franchise retail experiences have a minimum bay depth. They want parking, they want all these things that we can't have here.
Yeah.
So we have to find ways to compromise. And this is the organization that can really be the champion of the compromises that have to be made.
Completely agree.
Because no one else is going to do it. Buildings that have so many issues. So, all right, so we're on funding.
So should I resolve Matt's comment?
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. And then Angie's comment follows, but this is in the next bucket, activity scope of work. Collaborate with all partner government agencies, existing building organizations, and community groups. Angie, my number one concern is the transfer of properties and loan remaining to the CBO at this time. I can only support the agreement. Yeah, we agree. Long-term ground leases, that's the way to go. So there are a bunch of, several bullets on the following page under activities. I don't think anything here is new. It's somewhat redundant, it probably needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah, I think that the two bullets, create a board of directors and the one after it, I think those can both come out.
Good catch. We want to keep the coordination bullet in there, 501c3 bullet in there. Yeah, we talked about the board of directors, economically self-sustaining. I think we haven't captured that. I think that was the goal.
I think you've said that.
Yeah. We got this. Interaction with county government existing organizations does not compete with existing organizations' missions. We agreed on that last week. Ensure interaction, coordination, representation. Advisory board to be established. somewhat redundant with the prior section, which talked about the advisory board, but we can make the point again.
I think you can take out the second sentence since you already laid out with the advisory board.
That's good. And assets and projects. So all I said, county and state-owned, I had the word state or someone suggested it. But you did, I don't remember. Would be conveyed to the CDO or CDC at no cost. I think CDO is probably the way we're going with this. At no cost and physical stabilization, environmental remediation is conducted by the county.
I have a hard time seeing a situation where the state would convey a property to the CDO.
Okay. Are there any state properties at all? Who owns the courthouse?
The county.
I think the state has, if they don't own it outright, they have ownership rights to the Patapsco itself. And some of the water, some of the land on either side.
Well, no, actually, Baltimore County owns the Patapsco River to our side. That's the boundaries on our side.
So again, I'm sort of speaking from recollection, not from specifics, but I know that in order for the county to do certain work, they not only need the Maryland Department of the Environment's permission, but they actually need property owner permission from the state.
Is that because it's a state
I would
park?
take the state out. We got 20 in the county.
Yeah. And there are no federal assets we're thinking about also, to say. County-owned assets conveyed to CDO at no cost after physical stabilization, environmental remediation conducted. Assets include, and this is just a laundry list, remaining Lower Street buildings acquired by the county. So I try to be vague here because up until 2 days ago, it wasn't defined in terms of what the plan mitigation strategy was going to be and the quantity of buildings that would be affected by demolition and/or partial demolition and retention. Now I think there's clarity. There's certainly more clarity. But I'd still like to keep the language a little vague because this is a fungible discussion, right? We just don't know. There may be some buildings that we anticipate keeping that are beyond repair, and that won't be known until all the assessments are done. So I don't want to say this address, that address, that address. I don't think that's appropriate. But this would be the entity that would take stewardship of those assets once those decisions have been
And
made.
that might be part of the, again, the executive discretion.
So courthouse property, parking lots in the building, that's what I was referring to.
Can I ask you a total novice question?
Yeah.
This is really to you, Mike, and I suppose Gary, is real estate, like really, you know, developers with a long history in the field. So I completely understand the concept of the CDO in the place like, you know, Baltimore, where we're talking about buildings that really no one else is going to buy, and so it's sort of, here's the ground lease, we'll, you know, find ways, interesting ways to sort of finance their revitalization, so on and so forth. Where I'm a little stuck is, and just because I'm an idiot, so this, you know, we can take this offline if you want, but like, why would the county just give the CDO the courthouse if it in fact could sell it for $10 million or $20 million?
Probably because they can't do that.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I don't,
And maybe Tom, you
this question wasn't even directed to me. I'll just jump in.
Hey, Jeff, go for it.
I think it would have been helpful to have engaged that conversation earlier on in the process, but I don't think that you're just gonna have one developer show up and be like, I'm gonna drop $20 million in this building and be able to recoup it.
That's
So I
just
don't
one.
think it's one of the things where the county's just like, for sale, highest bidder. I just
I
think.
mean, the county could have an
risk is-
RFP process as well. I just don't understand why
It's
it's
an
sort of
RFP
the assumption of the, here, you guys take, you know, 100 years of revenue from, I don't know, maybe I'm just.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine that the CDC CDO potentially in some circumstance may be one bidder amongst many, because I do think that, you know, the courthouse, the county needs revenue, and the county, for valuable assets, they will sell them. So to Matt's point, that is certainly a possibility, and I know that they've received inquiries from people who want to buy that courthouse and turn it into event space, restaurants, convention hall, whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this organization could not be in a position to try to take ownership.
I'm thinking this organization will manage that solicitation for the county.
See, that makes sense to me.
That's where it makes sense to
What
me.
you want is you want to advertise for this piece of real estate regionally and nationally. and create an RFP that's attractive enough that you get some creative responses. My experience has been sometimes they're very divergent in what they propose, and they explain the economics of it and what the value to the county is. It's competitive, and there's some good ideas. And I've been in processes where the municipality said none of these, did it all over again, and just kept putting it out until it got what they had thought was right up.
So I get, that part I get completely. That seems like to me, the part was just, we've been talking about a lot of the other buildings, like the county's literally gonna say, here.
Or
Like,
in one
for
case-
100 years, you guys get to rent
in
this
one
out and do
case,
whatever you want with it, make the money.
Behind the Heine House, didn't know what the plans were. I had
I'm
shared
sure
those plans
it's
with
in
all of
various
us.
degrees.
And there might be plans for everything that's on the list.
Mhm.
But I think there's got to be more to this organization than just 4 buildings in downtown Oakland City that they look after. So it needs to have some basis, and I'm looking for some basis for it. And I think whether it's running the RFP process or responding to the RFP, that it has flexibility to growth and it offers its skills to the county to say, when it comes to disposition or public-private partnerships, we're a great organization to run that through. And we can champion the community's needs and the county's needs at the same time.
And part of the process is not to look at the county's ownership in a myopic way. And that's where the public-private partnerships come in. You begin to look at your neighbors and say, gee, if we did something together, 1 and 1 would equal 3. That might be this organization's attempt. It should be whoever you solicit for ideas, that they would contextually begin to think that way. Yeah, here's the property, but if I had that and I could work with this, I could create something even better. It's just that the process opens up.
And here's where I'm going to jump in as a novice. So, and Angie, feel free to answer.
Say it out loud.
So with regard to stepping in to say they don't take ownership of the courthouse, like the courthouse is not something that's like available for them, but they step in to run the RFP process and to manage that. What does the benefit for the CDO look like other than, see what a good job we're making? Like where's the revenue generation?
They participate in the cash flow. So the cash flow will be split on some to be negotiated basis between the elected officials, department heads, and the CDO in terms of how they might compensate them
Got it.
for the tutelage that they would have to provide, the stewardship that they would provide to the process.
And that would be
So
part
you
of the
gotta-
director's pitch to the county.
You've got to draft the RFP, you have to solicit bids, you've got to run the competition, you've got to have a review board, which might end up being the board of its directors. Again, we've got a lot of county agencies that we will engage in that process as well. And then someone will be awarded the development rights after a long process. And then it would probably be ground lease, which I think again is the best structure in the world. And there may be some co-participation between like a management fee, which is pretty typical. Most organizations that own properties pay a management fee or earn a management fee. And 3 to 5%, 4% of the cash flow is retained by the organization. The balance goes to the county to offset other obligations and needs the county has. And then the fight happens at the county level about where the billions of dollars go here in this community or that community or for these needs or that needs or things that need to be decided. But it's open, it's public. And I think this organization would be a great set of resources the county can use to run those solicitations and get best-in-class developers to step up.
And to make sure.
And Gary, sorry, you got to keep wrapping here for a second. And to deal with affordable housing, something that you've championed in this discussion quite a bit. Talk about how we can get more affordable housing, close to downtown where people want to live, where they have job opportunities and other ways. The bus service will be there.
Right,
It's like,
not an issue.
right. I mean, it knits together a lot of really cool things, and it happens in one place. And this is the kind of entity that I think could really champion all of those things.
Thanks for the
If you would make it
explanation.
happen. The other thing is that same organization would also bring in, public works, planning, all these other agencies into the process early on. They become part of the process. I don't see that happening on its own, it's so siloed. And so I think that would be another reason, it would expedite the process. I mean, put pencil to paper and, everybody had a say. And, oh yeah, have you thought about this? I got this mission, I need that. I was looking to this site to help satisfy that. Okay. it goes into the equation. Whereas normally it's linear, or it never, it's a better word.
The word that I used, convey, that has a very specific meaning legally. There may be a better word to use, contribute, I don't know, that might cooperatively engage with the county on the disposition of these assets, because this is where the value is in the historic district for this organization. The one thing this organization is not going to do is compete with the downtown ownership and say, I want to take your buildings, I want to take this building.
Right.
It's never been anybody's intent. I want to hear that. You know, if the camera's focused, please, that's always been. Never been anything anybody said in this
That is
room,
not a thing.
anybody's even thought about remotely. This is really to deal with the things that, the challenges that really, the economic returns aren't very clear, if any. And this is an organization we're trying to saddle with those responsibilities. At the same time, I want to give them access to a broader asset base so that they have a way to make some money and generate some money so that they can support the staff and the focus and mission of the group going forward. So I've got to have them have access to some of these assets to do that. Otherwise, you can't live off of a half dozen buildings in downtown that are constrained in terms of the marketability and usefulness, utility of those spaces.
I just wanted the clarity of where the revenue was flowing from.
So I've got a question for land back lawyer. As a 501c3, if somebody wanted to gift them a property in the historic district and take the tax credit for that, that would still allow the CDO to then turn that around, regentrify it, and sell that and use that as an asset, correct?
Correct.
So, I mean, because
There
that's...
there may be folks who want to contribute properties from that basis, and then it'd be an appraisal that was done to establish a value, and that value become the write-off value to that entity.
So actually, sort of an offshoot of that is in terms of finding assets that are ready to produce right away. Community Foundation of Howard County actually has a land trust where they receive donations of property. It might be worthwhile, once this organization is created, to talk to them if there are any properties in the catchment area that they might be interested in conveying. Because they are not property managers and they do not intend to be. It's rather, there were a bunch of real estate developers that said, I want to make a contribution to you, but I'm not liquid. Can I convey property instead?
So how do they handle those buildings, Tom? If they don't, do they manage the properties themselves, or?
I don't know exactly how they go about managing it, other than to say that they created this land bank that is managed by other real estate professionals.
Okay.
And I'm sure that they have people that they hire, but it's not, their preferred status is not owning those properties and managing it.
Do you know if they're income producing properties or just properties?
Anything than that is outside of my town.
I got you.
I would guess not. Most of them are just probably raw land, things that maybe a subdivision was built and there may be some land that was not buildable and it might be contributed to a trust and the trust would own it. And it may not be buildable, but it's an asset. And maybe it has some utilization, stormwater management, there may be other things. Again, I'm looking differently at this. It may not always just be buildings and things. There might be other assets that this organization could play with, to Tom's point. That,
Time and communication with the county would be a benefit to anybody that's building. And I'm sure that this organization will build those relationships. Time is money. The other thing is, we talk about property, but there's a community in Woodburn, I think it's North Carolina. It has all these Revolutionary period buildings, and these buildings were going to be taken down. And so they bought these buildings, they picked them up, moved them on lots, and waited sometimes 5 years for a lot to appear. You pick the building back up and put it down on the lot, and they'd rebuild it. So it wasn't just property, it was buildings. I'm not saying that for here because of the challenge of topography and whatnot, but creatively thinking, there are other assets out there.
Well, the log cabin, it's been picked up and moved.
Well, the George Ellicott house,
And that
too.
was George Ellicott house. It's not that it hasn't been done here.
No, but but again, there's a creative approach.
And at the risk of running down a serious tangent, but also going back to what Matt was saying and tying into what you were saying with regard to, like, if somebody were to donate property and somebody wouldn't, they could take it over and do something with it. That also might provide the opportunity for somebody who is in an early startup for a business that might not have the same economic means as somebody else that's from the community that would be able to come in and do a business kind of proposal for that, that could be something that would be championed as well, as opposed to, one of the big guys coming in and saying, oh, I can get that property and then we make a whole lot of money off of it, offering it as an opportunity for somebody to do a startup.
Do you want to try and resolve some of these conflicts?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Brooks' comment number one. Sorry. I think we did resolve. The Heine House, we clarified that is, there's a plan for it. The question I had about the Heine House, Ed's not here, but there seems to be a plan for the building. I don't know about the land. It sits on a fairly large parcel. Could be 6 acres roughly, 5 acres, I think. I don't know if there's a plan, or if it would conflict with the plans to have anybody look at the land separately from the building, but
For the Heine House?
yes.
You said it was going to be used for reenactment sites.
So that probably means they're using the dirt in front of the
And
fence.
again, I want to say it was Ed who told me, but I'm not sure, that I had heard that they were moving the lot, that's where they were relocating the log cabin to, it was still a portion of the Heine property. But I don't have that in writing, so I can't.
Well, we probably haven't got any place else to put it. There's no logic to it. I think we'd be getting into the weeds when we start.
So I'd be happy to strike Heine House from the list, because there does seem to be a plan.
Just take it.
Yeah. Question 2, from Ed, will lead the state. We agreed to take that off already, cross that one out. Question number 3, would the administration support this? It's kind of what we're talking about, unless Shane would
That's what
want
we're
to work on.
recommending.
Why don't we say assets could include? Also makes it clear.
Yeah.
Would
Not
it
limited to.
be, consistent with a lot of what has been said here, would it be helpful to reference that the CDC would prefer to have at least one income-generating asset, or some asset that could help provide sustainable income? Where I am on this is, I think that the more specific we are, they might say, well, we gave you what you asked for and that's it. I do wonder, for the good of this organization and to be able to get on its feet and running, if there are assets for which they're usable and leasable from the start, we might want to specifically call that out as something we would request.
That was the list I generated. These are the places that I can think of
Got
that
it.
might be of economic impact.
So county and parking lots, if you take the fees that are being generated from county parking, you put that in there, it's already a
Got it.
revenue stream.
Okay.
Or we need a structured parking garage on Lot E, if I have that correct. And somebody needs to pull that, how do you pull that off? And the struggle there has been historically that there's not enough retail bay at the base of that garage to support the expense of the garage without making parking expensive, too expensive for people who use the garage. So there might be a way through this organization to balance that. This organization takes a little bit of a hit financially, but they get the garage built if that's what everybody reasons to be done. We have retail that supports some of that debt service on the garage, and maybe the CDC takes on a portion of the debt service and makes those payments. And then we get something that a lot of people have clamored for at the partnership level, I think, for a long time, that we don't have parking. We're not parking in downtown Ellicott City, close to the core of Ellicott City Business District. Just an idea.
And I think there's a partnership opportunity in that lot.
Absolutely.
In the post office, some of those large footprint buildings that are next to it, there aren't that many buildings in Ellicott City that have a continuous footprint. And, they'd be partners.
I'm going to add the old post office to the list. I didn't think of that too much, just so that I
Back to what Tom said a minute ago, are we asking specifically for funding for the CDO initially? Because we can't.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You have to. There has to be, something has to help kick this off.
Right.
It's going to take some years.
2 to 3 years.
Right.
It'll take several years.
This is going backwards for a minute, but Ed did clarify that they are going to be using the acreage for the living history.
Thank you for
So,
And Matt, you
What's
had
that?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You had a comment about wanting to possibly delay the implementation of this for a while.
Yeah, I was just thinking, and again, only reading quickly the plans, and that, the buildings need to be stabilized and environmentally remediated. We know that the county's told us, hey, tougher budget situation than we've had. And so I'm just thinking, is the county, clearly there's a setup time. Absolutely. There, all of the legal stuff, the 501c3, staffing the organization, getting up and running, all of that takes time. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if we're talking about I'm just making this up, 4 to 5 years in the future, or 3, should the county be expected to fund year 1 when that means this thing's not going to do anything for X years? Or maybe does it make sense to do what can be done sort of from, the county needs to make it, the county executive needs to take this input and consider it, and then would we be expected to be set up the next day? I just think probably not.
So if I can just use a comparison, and I know I've referenced them a lot, the DAC. So what the DAC was set up to do, Downtown Columbia Arts and Cultural Commission, was they were set up to exist, to create their status, to advocate for itself, but its funding was not granted until the conveyance. So they were essentially an all-volunteer board, acting in a volunteer capacity until they got the asset. And with the asset came the funding and ability to operate. So I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I'm just sort of offering that up for the good of the order and discussion.
I feel like the county exec's going to make that call, and the council.
You're aware
In
of
terms
that?
of when you want to pull the trigger on setting this up and getting it running. I heard a lot of work needs to be done in Monday's press conference. There's a great deal of Historic Preservation Commission discussions and state discussions, and Nick Redding's group's going to weigh in. There's a lot of back and forth that's got to play out. In the meantime, while all that's going on, this recommendation, council and county executive get our recommendation and they decide how soon they want to elevate it. I don't know what I want to say. It should be year 1, year 3. I think we should let them decide.
So,
I agree with that.
yeah, the point, my comment to that is that if you waited until the funding asset happened, the ability to pre-work and start pre-establishing the things that you already know is going to be done would be hamstrung. So instead of being able to say, okay, we got the asset on this date and tomorrow we put out the RFP or whatever it is, now you have to wait and there's that key thing that I'll bring up again of time that we don't have. And so to me, it's like, I think it should start again at the soonest possible moment, so that as soon as those assets are ready to be turned over, there's already a pre-worked plan moving forward. So, yeah, because it's...
I'm not suggesting not. I'm just saying, I would just consider that. Yeah.
Because I think Mike's ultimately correct that the council and county executive are going to figure out how this is going to get set in. I mean, they're going to decide whether they're going to be comfortable trusting the organization, because no matter how many great people we have on the board for this organization, it's still going to be a new one. And we'll know that the first time we try to get a loan.
Well, it might be something too that it doesn't, it grows as opposed to creating this organization whole cloth. You may select somebody that will be the director. He goes around and introduces himself for the 6-9 months time. Is focused on figuring out what the need is, and then getting back to everybody and saying, well, I envision an organization that's structured like this, and funding might be like this, and I'm going to spend my time on these things. You know, he comes up with a strategy and an agenda, a timeline. You know, it's his responsibility or hers to do that, and to create it whole cloth. And again, we don't know exactly.
Timing is out of our control. I mean, we don't want more events to happen downtown, clearly. You know, scare last weekend with, and today they tested all the horns. I don't know if anybody was downtown when it happened.
I was.
We show up.
How did it sound? Did you hear it?
I heard it like a train station at the top. And then I got to the bottom of the hill and
So
I can hear
I
it.
think
I have a couple of ears.
like Michelle said that he could hear it, but the siren is like 50 feet from our building. I mean,
Oh,
so if he
yeah.
can't, then we got a problem.
But no dishes broke?
No
No dishes broke.
Because I'm assuming he heard the one that's in the tourism parking lot. I don't know what the other one is, but
That's what I heard.
Somewhere in West End, I heard.
oh, the colored school. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Mike.
Sorry, Tim.
Sorry, I've got just a basic question. I was thinking about timing, and there are so many things that are not within our control.
Yes.
Maybe not even ability to influence. But I'm wondering if it's worth trying to articulate what the sense of the group might be in terms of what we would say is a metric for success. In other words, does this entity become self-sustaining within X number of years? Because part of this might also be in terms of managing expectations, because there may be expectations in the broader community that this thing's going to be up and running right away, and it's going to be self-sustaining right away, et cetera. And I think it might be useful to signal that, hey, we understand that it's going to take time for this to get capitalized and develop that revenue stream such that it does become self-sustaining. But at the same time, I'd hate to create the impression that we're just creating kind of a blank check for the county to create an entity without any sense as to when it's expected to start walking and running on its own feet.
I don't think that would work.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to talk about sunsetting something that hasn't really, I don't know how much time to give it.
But even if we don't do it, can we articulate in our recommendation that somehow or another in the creation of the CDO, that those expectations are articulated so that other people will have a better understanding, so that it doesn't become that source of consternation
I
for
think
the
you kicked the
community?
can down. I think it's the director's responsibility in 6 months to create an agenda and a timeline and a scope and metrics. It's hard for us.
Is that what the board of directors does?
No, I think that's the director's job.
I think the county's gonna make that determination, because they're gonna be the one funding us until we're self-sustaining. But
People are going to want to know.
yeah, I mean, I think Tim makes a great point, but I don't think we're in a position to do it. But I think that the county is gonna make that determination in some form or fashion.
So do we at least say somewhere in our recommendation that they should consider that piece?
Well, they can set standards, performance standards. The board's going to have performance standards for the director, certainly. And they have to set organizational performance standards. The executive director needs to come to the board and say, here's my plan.
Right.
You know, and this is what we're going to implement it, and I need you to buy into it. So I think there's a mechanism that, again, we're not defining how it should work.
And I hear
But-
you from an internal perspective, but I'm thinking from an external optics
Well,
perspective.
there's an advisory committee, and it is comprised of the people who are looking
Okay.
for that feedback, that
Fair
input,
enough.
you know, and having access to that decision, that discussion. They would have access to that discussion.
To take, so I'm with Brooke, I think from a strategic standpoint, just what does this group think success looks like? I think Tim's question is great. I don't think we should be on the hook to set it for the, in the recommendations. I don't, this is the kind of thing that metrics are always difficult, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even really talking about, metrics, even capital M, small m, but like what in general is success?
Before we go down this rabbit hole, do we want to resolve these last two comments?
Because we've not talked about this, and we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to wrap up this evening. Pens down. So there's actually three. Pay lots at Lilly, to be determined. I don't think anybody knows how the parking lots would function.
I think those discs are still on the ground.
Yes, they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
They are, yeah. The numbers are still there too.
So just need to call that contract back.
Yeah, we tried everything. So,
You heard me, internets, that's what I said.
yeah. Yeah. And I think they're happy with the way it is right now. HS 15 from Ed, already owned by Rexon Park, we covered that. That's the Heine House. And 16 from Matt, we talked about this, Matt, I think, right? A year or two, we were just talking about that.
Yep.
We lost the parking lot question.
Yeah, well, there's going to be a lot of hands in making that decision this time, however that plays out.
Read them down while you're at it.
We don't have to, we can call it a day. We don't have to-
That's the document as we described it up until Tim's comment this evening. It can be, I think what we ought to do is to accept the changes and circulate this again, and write it up. And we're not convening next week. We're convening in 2 weeks, we can. And I'd like to see if we can have a write-up in 2 weeks, if that's feasible, when we need authors. So Nick has weighed in and said he'd like to help. So maybe what Shane and I can do is just take that offer, take a look at the non-red line version of this, and see if we can kind of cobble the story together and have something for you all to read in a couple of weeks.
Does anyone else want to help? Tom will help?
Actually, Actually, I would like to.
All right.
That's great.
Great.
You know, send me equivalent.
Great.
I have a step back.
I just want to put my John
Right.
Hancock on it, so, oh.
And again,
You just pass it around to
too
the
many
committee.
writers
Yeah,
are
exactly.
needed. I think we just need a couple of people to write.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Generating
I'm worried that
review.
it's going to take a lot of time to get the draft done if we have 5 authoresses.
We get to the board, the
Working
the
hard.
board, cast of thousands.
Overworking.
Cast of thousands again.
Yeah,
So-
my offer of help is to the extent it's necessary. I don't want to impose myself, but I write for a living and I'm happy to offer that service.
Okay.
So just looking at the first page, so I added this section, which is just the introduction, which lays out just a lot of the logistical information about why you guys are here, what the charge was, committee members, meeting dates, organizations you heard from, and then the official recommendation. So that's still something that needs to be worked out.
Is it fair at the end of this to address, we discussed how do we kickstart this? And just identify some of the dilemmas or the alternatives. Is this something that starts whole cloth immediately? I doubt. Could it begin with the director and charge them with putting together an agenda and whatnot, and the need for transparency in this process?
Gary Most. I think what our charge from the county executive is come up with a recommendation. The recommendation is that I heard that we want to create a city recommend for the CDO to be created. We have sort of the bones of how, what that CDO should do, that we spent countless weeks negotiating internally. It's comprised of a couple of pages of text that needs to be written up. And we produce this recommendation, we present it to the county executive. He decides what he wants to do with it, files it with the council, with a bill, creates a piece of legislation. I think that steps up to him. And we need someone to write the report. I think that's the most important thing that we need to do next. And Shana raises the question about the recommendation just a second ago. So my recommendation, I think what I've been hearing consistently, create a community-owned organization. And that community-owned organization is doing the things that we just spent, I think, 3 weeks actually, describing and synthesizing here. And we'll put a little more meat on that, and that would be a pretty concise report, recommendation with the county executive, and Liz Walsh and the other members of the county council. And then it falls to them to decide what the next steps are. And we'll be there to support those steps, presumably as a group and individually, hopefully.
So what should the language of this recommendation be, this sentence right here?
Should create a community owned for Ellicott City, perhaps.
Just copy the mission statement.
Basically.
Distillation of a vibrant, diverse community, Ellicott City for the reinvestment revitalization and use of partnerships. So public-private partnerships.
Within the area defined by the, well, no, but for the record.
That's a dumb question. Why couldn't we just give the executive list?
I was gonna say, I actually
I guess it is dumb.
Shannon's document with like the executive order, which is, tab A or something, and the intro is literally like 3 sentences. Meeting, like, this is done, isn't it? Shannon, did you envision much more?
I hate to put you in the sort of school marm role here with all this, but.
I don't envision much more, but I envision a report and not an outline.
Yeah, I do too. And I think I
I
can
have
pass on
flashbacks
that.
on high school essay.
So you're saying a 4-page synopsis isn't gonna cut it?
Well, I'm not saying that 4
report?
pages won't cut it, I'm saying that this is an outline, and
Right.
I was
Taking
picturing
bullets and
a report,
putting them
yeah.
into paragraphs.
Yeah.
But yeah, putting some
Paragraphs,
context
headings.
and
I think that's a good idea.
full sentences and periods, punctuation points and things like that.
So now,
Put Easter eggs on
do
it.
we want to be available for questioning by the county executive when we get this over?
I
he'll tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think
Let
that's
you
been
know.
defined.
He'll reach out. if he has
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, Kelvin has a lot on his plate.
Now, notice I didn't say, should we schedule a meeting to present it, I said, should we be available? At his discretion.
So I can write the introduction section, and then Mike, I will leave it up to you to break out the other sections.
That's fine.
All right.
I'll start working with that.
Cool.
All right, we finished early.
We have,
Good job,
thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Shane.
Nice work, Mike.
Thanks, guys.
Is the
Thank
buffet
you.
coming now? Is that? It's not on.